Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Chris and I and all of our partners in our firm are appreciative of you being here this morning and showing your support and respect for our partner, Ken Pursley. He was a very memorable and important person to all of us and to our law firm. And so thank you very much for coming, and thank you to Betsy and the family for allowing us to say a few words about KP.
Ken was an individual who had a background that really qualified him to do almost anything he wanted to do. He'd had a special training in the hills of California. Then he had gone to the university on the East Coast and ultimately ended up at the Chicago Law School. He performed outstanding at each one of those institutions. Ken could have undertaken anything he desired. He selected the law. Subsequently, he went into business and pursued his real estate interests. Ken excelled at all these things.
What I learned over time was a lot of what we had that was different here was due to Ken. Fairness, high intellect, people who wanted to do well, but also do good things. I think it's a kind of a tribute to Ken that over the last 50 years, I don't think there's another firm in Idaho that started organically that is of the size of the firm we have now, and that's, I think, really a tribute to Ken.
His legacy and part of what he enjoyed about Givens Pursley was that it provided a good place to work, a place for people to professionally succeed on their own terms, and a place where 40 families derived a source of income to make a living, and really brought that home to me that was a big deal.
Ken was a very compassionate man. He knew everybody's name. He knew who had kids. He was always interested in their kids. He would ask questions about them before he cared about himself. I often joked with him because he was so generous that whenever he wanted to adopt my son, I was more than happy to change his name to Pursley, and I would be good with that.
He had quite a presence about him. One of the things that we as associates used to joke about is our, fear, or the way that our bodies change when, Ken wanted to talk to us, especially those who didn't work with him every day. And one of the other associates used to go down into Ken's office and dial my number so that I would see 210 on the telephone, or have the little red light goes on and you'd hit the button to see who it was, and it was Ken. And that, my heart would go, oh, Ken wants to see me. What's going on? And then it was a joke. But, because, Ken didn't call upon us too frequently, and if it was something we needed to deal with right away.
When I was a very new lawyer, I had the opportunity to work with Ken closely for a couple of years on day-to-day type projects. And while it was terrifying at the time, he would sit in his office with his feet up on his very messy desk and stare you down and ask you why you put a single word into your agreement, and you had to defend that from start to finish. And Ken has, really had a good impact on my writing, and I think about that a lot now as I practice in my career.
I remember one of my first partner meetings at the firm. I spoke up on an issue that was tense, and I felt at the time that it caused some ripples. The next day I got the characteristic note from Ken, a yellow sticky note right on the computer screen that said, "See me, KLP." I worried about it for a while and finally ran into Ken in the kitchen, and he said, I just wanted to let you know I was proud of you for what you said last night. And that was it. That's all it took. A few words from him could lift you up and make you feel proud.
He had a great authority about him. So I think to the point that some people might have found him intimidating, although I never did. I always felt that there was always a twinkle in his eye and a smile at the corner of his mouth, no matter what was going on. So he just had this great quality about him of being able to command a situation without being stuffy about it.
He had a tremendous love of life. He had great intellectual curiosity. And those two characteristics, combined with the fact that he had a vision not only for this firm, but what he believed society should have been and could be, allowed him to bring people along. More than anything else, he had the ability to find opportunity in almost any setting and bring people together to really accept his vision in a way that it wasn't mandated by him. It was just, again, the legitimacy of the concepts, and people followed him. And that was the greatness that he was.
He really believed in getting consensus. One of the unique things about Givens Pursley is we don't have a written partnership agreement. We try to do things by consensus, and Ken really was the guy that made that happen. He would show up in your doorway before a big decision was going to be made and said, hey, we're going to be considering this issue. Now, it doesn't mean that he'd already decided he knew exactly what was going to happen and how it was all going to go down, but he made you believe that you were helpful in making that decision. He'd come into your office, tell you about it, lays out the pros and cons, and then you'd ultimately reach the same decision that he had and say, well, that's a really good decision, Deb. Thanks so much for talking. But you'd feel a part of it. So that's Ken's management style that I really appreciated. It made people feel like they're really a part of something. And so he was able to guide us without us really knowing it sometimes.
Ken decided to run for Congress, and he asked me to be his treasurer, so I was very involved in the campaign. Our friend Bob Angel was the finance chair, and we spent a lot of time together that year when he was running for Congress. He came closest anybody came to defeating Steve Sims, and he developed a large cadre of admiring folks around the state in the process. It was a great experience for me, and there were times I remember so fondly. Ken was not, I guess, put simply, he was not a snappy dresser. In fact, he didn't much care about clothes, but he cared about issues, and he went around and talked to people, and we would have to sneak his shoes out of his room and go get them polished. And we'd have to remind him to tuck in his shirt tail when he was on camera. But he was all about the issues, and I remember that time very fondly.
So Ken and I started out on the South Fork of the Boise one day after a firm retreat. I was going to row him down the river, and he was going to show me all the great fishing spots on the South Fork. We spent a great day out on the river, him fishing, me rowing, and after a long day, we got to the takeout, and it turned out he hadn't caught one fish all day. In fact, I don't think he got one bite all day. And somewhat in jest, I said, "Gee, Ken, I'd always heard that you were quite a fisherman." And he turned to me and he said, "Yeah, and I always heard that you were quite a boatman." So it really turned the tables on me there.
Well, as a fisherman, Ken was really pretty focused. He was very good, and I think focus is probably the best way to describe him. I know I was struggling when we were in Argentina, and we shared a room together, and I got very little advice from him during the day, and there were some windy days, and I was struggling to get my line out. And then, right before we went to bed, he said, "You know, Dave, if you would not drop your rod tip when you cast, you'll do better." Of course, he never said it to me again. Didn't say it to me when we were actually confronting the wind because he was busy fishing. So I think at least my experience is to say that when Ken was fishing, he was focused, and he was very good at it and very successful.
For many years, there was a rotating golf game weekly. It included people like Bob Sims, Ken Pursley, Conley Ward, Pat Beater, and me. And for those of you who know the others, all strong, very opinionated Democrats, and I'm not a shy Republican. And it was a wonderful time being with enormously good people, arguing about politics throughout a whole round of golf, having a beer afterwards, and enjoying the company of people that you can't agree with on politics at all. It was a time in politics where people could disagree and still be friends, and I miss those times.
Ken was, without question, one of the smartest people I've ever been around. Always thinking, always figuring not just the obvious path, but some not so obvious paths or other angles of a problem. I would often see him in his office, which was next door to mine for almost 3 years, with his feet up on the desk and the blunt end of a pen in his mouth, chewing and looking up at the ceiling, thinking. And it was always, I knew it was always to somebody's great benefit. Often this firm is a very well-run firm because of Ken Pursley.
I still remember around 4:30 or 5, the joke in the firm was that you could tell it was around that time because you could see Ken Pursley going down the hall back to his office. He'd have a can of beer in one hand, and he'd have his pants tucked in one cowboy boot and tucked out the other cowboy boot, and his shirt out there, and you know he was just going back to relax at the end of the day. And you know, there's times that you know, even though he retired 10 years ago, I still feel his presence around this place, even then, and I'd come around the corner and see him every once in a while. And you know, that's probably one of the saddest things about his passing to me, is I still, just in this building, have that expectation that I'd come around a corner and he'd be there, and he's not going to be. And you know, that thought just really brings home to me how much we're all going to miss him.
I, like everyone who knew him, had the blessing of being in the presence of a genius. Not any genius, but a gentle and caring genius, a man who cared so deeply about the place that he lived and the people whose lives he touched. It was a distinct pleasure to be mentored by Ken. I was not much of a student, a slow learner. I've struggled with the lessons, but one thing that he tried to teach, and I've tried to learn, is the power of using fewer words. You should try it sometime. Ken, you've done well by all of us. We miss you horribly.
Ken's legacy for us was the creation of this place that we were able to practice our career and our profession for many years, and he gave us a great platform from which to allow us to succeed and to carry on his legacy, and we can't thank him enough for that opportunity.
Ken Pursley was a great friend, a great law partner, most important probably to me and to Chris and others in the firm, a great mentor, somebody who just had such a significant impact on my life and all of our lives. I'm so thankful that the stars and the moon steered me to be able to share part of Ken's life, and so I'm sure thankful for that.